say the cry of the cat is designed to mimic that of an infant child, a cunning, devious ploy. Let some call this twist of nature dumb luck alone. I know better. I know its dark and devious ways, for I know what lies in the darkest clearing of Miriam Wood. I was 19 when it happened, a mere boy back from college with my older brother, Jackson. It was scarcely past October and all through the suburban sprawl jack-o'-lanterns decayed into an unpleasant funk behind white picket fences and foreclosure notices. I was never one for adventure, I preferred my books, hijinks were Jackson's territory. But I was with a girl, then. Natalie. She was 17, and beautiful, and I was very much in love, though I doubt she ever knew it. She had a voice like a canary, high, and fluttering, and full of life. In many ways she was immature, but in so many ways I was captivated by her every juvenile fancy. We all knew the place, rather, we all knew the story that it had become. Miriam Wood. It was a dense patch of overgrowth so thick you could scarcely push an arm through it without prying away briars and timber. It is easy to see how a place such as the Wood would attract tales of horror amongst school children. It was an anachronism, one last stretch of real, actual nature amongst the hideous acreage of endless, and endlessly uninventive housing. Like something out of Gothic, it loomed low in the darkness, up at the houses on the hills, and when I looked out of my window as a boy I swore I saw cultists' fires in clearings, and dark eyes looking up at me from the pit. I know a path, deep into the woods, said Jackson. It's the kind of thing we miss out on every Halloween. Pretty soon they'll drive a bulldozer through the old place, and there will be nothing left but cookie-cutter houses and privacy fences. And then we'll regret not having done this. I don't know how he thought he had talked me into it, but it was Natalie's childlike intrigue that drove me on. Though the thought of it clearly scared her as much as it did me, I could see the imagination in her eyes, the conception of dread that formed in her about Miriam Wood. And so I agreed, and we drove out to the edge of it, with little more than 2 flashlights and an electric lantern between us, and we set into the darkness to conjure up our fears into something memorable, for nostalgia's sake. For Natalie's sake. At first there was moonlight in the wood and there were crickets chirping, and birds a-flutter in the foliage that tumbled down on us so thick it got in our eyes, but as we treaded deeper along this trail that Jackson had led us to, it became something blacker, something darker. Something more winding by the footstep and more muddy, and the crickets turned to silence, and the birds to stillness, and the moonlight was consumed by a canopy of sheerest black. I could have sworn it was a mile high to the tops of the evergreens, and in the dead of night I felt something innately awful, like a stench of foretold death stuck in my sinuses. But at every unexpected footfall, Natalie held onto my arm, and I played myself the fool I so pitifully forgot I was, and I kept quiet even as Jackson suggested turning back now. And then, there was no hand on my arm, and all that was left of Jackson was the crumpled beer can he had left. Funny, I remember saying, though what I felt was perhaps the farthest thing from humor. Had I any conception of the deepest roots of fear in the natural order of things, I might have trusted my intuition as it screamed to me. Turn back, it said. It tasted blood. It smelled death. It ruined me to the core of all feeling, and in the darkness I faded silent. I had never felt so paralyzed in all my life, but what would come would make it pale in comparison. For we were not alone in Miriam Wood. I don't know how he thought he had talked me into it, but it was Natalie's childlike intrigue that drove me on. Though the thought of it clearly scared her as much as it did me, I could see the imagination in her eyes, the conception of dread that formed in her about Miriam Wood. And so I agreed, and we drove out to the edge of it, with little more than 2 flashlights and an electric lantern between us, and we set into the darkness to conjure up our fears into something memorable, for nostalgia's sake. For Natalie's sake. At first there was moonlight in the wood and there were crickets chirping, and birds a-flutter in the foliage that tumbled down on us so thick it got in our eyes, but as we treaded deeper along this trail that Jackson had led us to, it became something blacker, something darker. Something more winding by the footstep and more muddy, and the crickets turned to silence, and the birds to stillness, and the moonlight was consumed by a canopy of sheerest black. I could have sworn it was a mile high to the tops of the evergreens, and in the dead of night I felt something innately awful, like a stench of foretold death stuck in my sinuses. But at every unexpected footfall, Natalie held onto my arm, and I played myself the fool I so pitifully forgot I was, and I kept quiet even as Jackson suggested turning back now. And then, there was no hand on my arm, and all that was left of Jackson was the crumpled beer can he had left. Funny, I remember saying, though what I felt was perhaps the farthest thing from humor. Had I any conception of the deepest roots of fear in the natural order of things, I might have trusted my intuition as it screamed to me. Turn back, it said. It tasted blood. It smelled death. It ruined me to the core of all feeling, and in the darkness I faded silent. I had never felt so paralyzed in all my life, but what would come would make it pale in comparison. For we were not alone in Miriam Wood. It was an alien tone, a garbled thing, wholly inhuman, a bad pretender. I could not cry for Jackson. I could not cry for Natalie. I knew that, had I, it would not be my voice in the darkness, in the wood. I knew in what tongue my words, and my cries, and my final screams would be uttered, if such things as what I saw have tongues at all. They say the cry of the cat is designed to mimic that of an infant child, a cunning, devious ploy. Let some call this twist of nature dumb luck alone. I know better. I know its dark and devious ways, for I know what lies in the darkest clearing of Miriam Wood.
Haven't seen an Innawoods creepypasta thread in a while. Starting off with one that's related to some shit that went down at work today. Now have a job, working in the US Forest Service in Oregon. Be out today, basically getting to know the lay of the land. Out looking for a spring that didn't get put on any of the newer maps because no one wanted to go survey the thing and rebuild Springboks in the 80s. With 3 others. We've driven up what is more or less a cow trail, marked as a road on the map. Also the older maps show the spring at the end of the road, as far as the 4-wheeler can take us. Now hiking up what is now classified as a deer trail. Reach an old landing from a logging operation a few years ago. I step off behind a tree to go take a piss. Other 3 go one without me. Can hear them for a while, then freaking silence except for birds. Well damn. Start hiking up the trail, figure they can't be too far ahead of me. Find split in the trail, start up the more well-worn path figuring they'd gone that way. Can now hear knocking, kinda like someone tapping a wooden cowbell. Stop and look around, it's slow and methodical, kinda calming. Can still hear the birds, figure it's 2 deer fighting or something. Keep going down this trail, knocking still happening, birds still chirping. Then all of a sudden silence, wind dies and the rain comes to a complete stop. The knocking is rather rapid. Clouds cover up the sun, and this area of the forest just gets spooky dark and something just feels wrong. Take a couple steps forward, knocking picks up tempo and is as fast as a wicked drum solo. I back off, and away warily looking around back to the old landing. Knocking has returned to its calmer, slower tapping. Birds chirp, rain falls, wind picks up. Can hear the other foresters again coming back. Apparently the springs were along the deer trail and not the cow trail I'd gone down. Also a lot further than expected. Ask if anyone else had heard the knocking. No one else heard crap. Someone blames a woodpecker. Shrug and accept that. Didn't sound right for a woodpecker. Check the old map from the 50s that was leading us. Sunk mine springs. Call it what you will, not sure the hell it was, might have been a Tommy knocker or a trick of the wind. Still something was wrong / off with that cow trail.
I've never told this story to anyone, and I don't really intend to tell it again. I have a pounding migraine today, and this thread has kept me good company as I've drifted in and out. I don't really like talking about this time in my life, but I want to contribute. When I was 10 to 12 I lived with my mother. We were below poverty level poor. We lived up in the mountains around Santa Cruz, California. My mother had a friend that owned a large bit of property up there, and he let us stay in a trailer up there. Our trailer was very small, and was right beside a garden. A chain link fence ran around the garden, to keep the dog the owner had out, along with other animals. Deer and things are very common in the area. Also inside the fenced area was a single room. It was built like a tiny house, but it was only a single room on the inside. This room had electricity, and since our actual trailer didn't, I spent a lot of my time in there. I was super into video games. Sorry, this story will be fairly long. I am bad at not writing a lot. I just want to tell it right, if this will be the only time. Taking on a random name so I can be easily identified in this thread. There was one thing you should know right now. This small fenced-in area was only a small part of the property, but most of it was heavily forested. Also, I refused to leave the fenced area, because the owner's dog had been mistreated by children in the past and was very sketchy towards me all the time. If I was alone, it would bite at me, even through the fence. The fence was tall, at least 7 feet high, and wasn't movable though. So as long as the gate was closed I was safe. That said, tiny bit of the property. There is no one else around for miles and miles. Now, I tell you all this, because I think it is important you understand what kind of scene this was before I really get into this story. We have a fenced-in location that seems fairly safe. It contains a trailer and a single room with power that is not connected to the trailer. Nothing else around for miles. My mom's van is parked out in front of the gate to the fenced-in area, and a single unpaved road runs from this garden for about a mile to the main house. Now then, I brought friends up there to sleep over here and there. We all thought it was pretty cool, you know? Like camping out, sort of. Besides, we would get our own room to stay in, to play video games all night long. It was like a dream come true. The downside was simple. When it got dark out, it got really dark out. No city around, and the trailer would not be lit up. There was no bathroom to use in the room, and you would have to walk through the dark garden in order to get to the trailer to use it. Odd things happened out here from time to time. It was always something that could be somewhat easily explained away though. Noises like people working at night sometimes. Or once me and a friend were sitting out in the garden, and we saw a shadow as big as a small bear bound up a tree, but the tree didn't shake like there was weight on it. The dog also creeped me out, but you know. Angry dog, I was a kid. It happens. Now, I am a scaredy cat. I always have been. To be honest, I don't know why I even come to /x/. I have trouble walking through a lit house if I am all alone. My friends, however, tend to be more outgoing. Just the kinds of people I get along with. This time I had a friend over. His name was Jacob. We were staying up all night and playing Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Knuckles, on my Sega Genesis on a ratty old television. We started playing as the sun went down, and by the time we were finishing up the game it was about 2 a.m. That's when we heard it. We turned off the game getting ready to find something else to play. There was a rumbling in the woods behind the room we were in. Like somebody was rolling something really heavy around. We hadn't heard it before because the noise from what we were playing was loud. Immediately I had goosebumps. Jacob was not really worried about it, but it's not like there was someone else's house or yard right over there. It was forest for miles, and it sounded like someone was constructing something or some crap. Dragging or rolling something really big. Eventually Jacob convinced me to just play some more games. I agreed on the condition that we turn the volume down so we could hear if something happened. We started playing, and I didn't even notice the noise stop because I was getting engrossed. A couple hours later, Jacob said he had to use the bathroom. I was feeling fine by then, so I was fine when he left to the trailer to relieve himself. He was taking a while, so eventually I decided I was going to go check on him. Besides, I could use the bathroom and grab a snack while I was at it. I opened the door to leave, and he was just standing at the doorway. Right outside the door, facing it. Scared the hell out of me. I asked him what he was doing and he just stood there. Blocking the exit. I realized he must have sneaked up to the door, because I could hear him walk away from the room, but I hadn't heard him walk back up to it. It was super quiet out there without the noises of the city. I should have been able to hear. He refused to say anything or respond. He just stood there. I told him he was really creeping me out. But it was not unlike him to try and scare me like this. Finally, I decided to just go to the trailer and use the bathroom myself. Partially because I knew my mother was asleep in there. I told him what I was doing, then moved past him. When I pushed him out of my way a little, his skin felt freezing to the touch. I jumped a little. But it was a cold night and he had been standing out there for like 30 minutes. So I figured that was to be expected. I walked as quickly as I could over to the trailer. He followed me, like right on my tail. It was unnerving. I joked a little, saying that he already surprised me by scaring me at the door. The joke is over already. Finally I got to the trailer, and walked in. He didn't follow, just stayed at the doorway. I checked on my mom, who was fast asleep, then turned to go into the bathroom. Now, it being a porta potty, we keep the bathroom door shut because it, well, smells bad. When I reach for the door and try to open it though, it's locked. A nervous voice came from behind the door. I'm in here. I quickly turned to look at Jacob, but the door was still open and there was nothing there but pitch black night. I freeze in terror. I would have heard the bathroom door open if he had come in behind me and gone that way. There is no way to do it quietly, it creaks like a mother lover. I yelped so loud that my mom woke up startled. I stared at the doorway, unable to bring myself to move a muscle. She got up, walked over there and looked out. Not seeing anything, she closed the door and asked me what was wrong. By now, Jacob was coming out of the bathroom and acting perfectly normal, but a bit confused. I explained what had happened. Jacob said he was just taking a long time in the bathroom, basically. Neither of them believe me at all, no matter how much I insist. My mom is sure that I just got sleepy and imagined it. Jacob thought I was trying to prank him. So my mom gets out a big flashlight and walks us back to the room. She tells us to go to sleep. Then leaves and goes back to bed herself. Now, this room doesn't have any windows or anything. So, after a while I calm back down a little. I'm telling myself that my mom was right. I must have had like, a waking dream or something. Jacob insists he was in the bathroom the whole time, and I'm inclined to believe him because there is just no way to really get around without being heard. So, I settle down. I'm a little rattled, but I am thinking I can just sleep it off through the night. Suddenly, the dog starts going nuts. Right behind us. The room is up against the fence, so the dog must have been like, right behind the room on the other side. I felt like I jumped so high I was surprised I didn't hit the roof. Jacob's laughing at me like, "Ha, dog barking at a squirrel or some crap, and you are screwing yourself." It keeps going like that for a long time though. Suddenly the barking stops and gets replaced by whimpering. We hear the dog run away. There are about 45 seconds of silence before we hear something new. A small scratching sound on the back wall of the room. We both try to be as silent as we can. Eventually it stops. After 5 or so minutes of silence, Jacob decides to be brave. He insists he is going to go get my mother up, tell her something crazy is going on and we're going to go from there. With some kind of divine adult protection, no doubt. I wish he wouldn't leave me alone, but there is no way I am going out there. Never ever. He arms himself as best he can. With a tennis racket we had in the room with us. Then he takes a couple deep breaths and opens the door and dashes out. I close it as quick as I can behind him. In less than 30 seconds, I hear a scream. Not long after the door flies open, and he comes back in looking pale as a ghost. He's breathing like he just ran a marathon. His eyes look as big as dinner plates. I ask what is going on like 4 times before he finally starts getting words out. He tells me he walked out there and as he was walking through the garden as quick as he could he saw my mom. Just standing there. He tried to talk to her, but she stared at him with a blank expression. Getting super creeped out because of what happened to me earlier, he took a couple more steps towards her telling her that he thought something was in the woods. Suddenly, her face turned to an awkward smile. Then he realized something terrible. He hadn't noticed sooner because of the darkness and how much of a hurry he had been in. She was on the other side of the fence. Now, the door to this room does not lock. And as I explained earlier, this room had no windows. He had been trying to move stuff in front of the door as he told this story, and by the end I was helping him. In retrospect, whatever was harassing us seemed to be averse to actually entering the room or the trailer, because the Jacob one didn't come in either time he could have. And this room was not sturdy. Either way. We stacked everything we could against the door, thinking somehow that like cartoons this would totally definitely keep the creature out. For the rest of the night we heard scratches coming from all around the room. I cried. Jacob looked like his mind had left his body with fear. At one time I thought I heard it speak too. I heard from right next to where I was resting against the wall, in my mother's voice, quietly. The same exact phrasing and intonation she had used earlier in the night. "What's wrong?" Followed immediately by "Go to sleep. The sun must have come up eventually." The scratching eventually stopped. We heard my mom come to get us, this time actually hearing footsteps. We absolutely refused to leave the room. My mom had to go get the property owner, and have him take the door off. When we saw that it was actually her, I burst into tears again. We never had any experiences like these again, and eventually moved away. But that night still haunts me. I still refuse to go out at night unless I am with a bunch of people, and I will never ever live in the woods again. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed hearing about this. If you want to make an image and repost it, feel free. I probably won't tell this again though. Thanks for listening. What's wrong? Followed immediately by "Go to sleep." I'm freaking shivering. The worst part was it was a completely different intonation. Kind of like taking two different sentences out of two different scenes in a TV show, of the same person talking and then clipping them together. Ugh. Words cannot describe how freaking eerie it was. If I was not all drugged up on pain meds due to this migraine right now, I would be beside myself having to even talk about this.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that skinwalkers or goatmen or whatever were a thing, allegedly a thing, so I always thought I was the only one who'd experienced something like this, like maybe it was a hallucination or something, but after reading some of these stories, I'm starting to think maybe there's something there. Here's what happened. Few years ago, living with parents. Step out for cigarette at about 2 a.m. Mom hated cigarettes, had to sneak out back by the woods. Smoking, notice my neighbor Sean down at the edge of the woods, looking at me. WTF. Wave at him, he just stands there. Suddenly it's hard to breathe, like the air is thick, kind of humid, I guess, and it smells the way pennies taste. Kick myself for being a scaredy cat. Take a drag from cigarette, smoke gets in my eye. If this has happened to you, you know that it hurts like a bitch. I'm forced to close my eyes and rub them for a few seconds. Look up and Sean is closer to me, like he'd walked from the edge of the forest but now he's stopped and standing still again. What was he doing in the forest anyway? WTF is going on? He waves, but it's like he's jerking his arm instead of moving it fluidly, like he's not sure what he's doing with it. What the hell, what the hell? Put out cigarette without taking eyes off him, back into the door and go in. Shut the door, peek out window. He's staring right the hell at me, closer to the house, maybe 10 or 15 yards away. Lock door, sprint upstairs. Lock every door in the house, go to double check every door. Double checking basement door, he's standing right outside the window staring at me. His jaw is just kind of drooping. When I look at him he does the jerking wave again. Scream with the force of 1,000 suns. Run upstairs, encounter stepdad, he's like WTF are you screaming for Anon? I tell him there's someone outside. He gets his gun and checks. No one there. Ask neighbor about it at dinner one day. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. Goddamn skinwalkers.
Time for the spooky forests threads. Alright, I'll start with a story from my life. Be me. 20 years old, still with parents because poor. Means I have to travel with them. Time to visit family in that really rural, southern part of the world. Called Tennessee. Freaking backwoods as hell, man, not inbred, but these people are like 2 seconds away from donning KKK masks or something, holy crap. But family get together means we have to hang out. Decent people when you get to know them. Somehow, group up with 3 cousins and a friend from out of town. Call them Eddie, Garrett, Austin, and Trent. These are the names of people I know / related to, but not in the right configuration. I'm not great at making up names. We sneak off with a 6-pack my grandpa left out. Good man, but terribly unobservant. Find a clearing a few minutes out, maybe an hour, hell I don't know. Adrenaline kills my sense of time. Garrett, the local cousin in these here parts, seems really nervous. Older than me, but keeps whimpering every time we push forward. He carries an old rifle from like the old days when they hunted for a living. Eddie and Austin are keeping him cool, telling him we'll only be out here for a bit. Light up a small lamp. We're all getting a little tipsy, but not drunk. I have like half a can and call it good. Still don't have a taste for alcohol. Garrett suddenly says we shouldn't be here. Well, no crap, we stole beer from our hit grandpa. No, man, we really shouldn't be here. We should leave. We debate, arguing, I'm digging the atmosphere. Suddenly, it gets really freaking cold. We put on jackets we dragged along, but holy crap, man, is it cold. We really shouldn't be here, guys. We have to leave. Austin laughs and Trent grunts. Lamp flickers as a bug bumps it. Big ass bugs and cold wind, forget this place. Garrett, now super pissed, picks up Austin and basically stands him up like a good little soldier. We're leaving. Except he's not telling us, he's not even looking at us. He's yelling behind Trent. Trent and I are trying to figure out what the hell we're doing, since we're about to reenact Hatfields and the damn McCoys in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, Garrett picks up his gun and aims at Trent. Austin drops like a rock. Trent is scared crapless. I'm wondering what the hell I'm going to say to the cops about all this. We're leaving, ain't we, fellas? Trent slowly turns around out of curiosity. I swear I have never seen a look as terrified as the one on Trent's face. Austin sees Trent, looks to me. I stare back, too chicken shit to see what's going on behind Trent. Trent suddenly sprints past Garrett, who keeps aiming his gun at whatever the hell is back there. Anon, Austin, don't move until I tell you, but when I say it, run like a black guy in a henhouse. At this point, too scared to call out that bullshit, just dumbly nod my head. Try to sneak a peek. Anon. Don't move. Garrett quietly moves, picks up lantern by hooking it with the muzzle. We're leaving now, we don't want any trouble. We didn't mean anything by it. Something freaking moves in the bushes. Cold gets colder, literally a second from pissing myself. Garrett stops breathing for a moment, lantern swings gently. Run. I am not a fast man. Tonight I was freaking Usain Bolt. Austin is like 5 feet from me, I can hear him crying. I'm crying too. I hear 3 gunshots, one every few seconds. And then the scream. You know, as I'm typing this, I realize I'm actually tearing up. This crap is not a freaking joke, but it feels better to write it down than just bottle it up. Anyways. Have you ever heard a coyote yelp? They sound like they're sorta young kids crying and yelling. I grew up with coyotes in the backyard. This did not sound like a coyote. It was high-pitched, higher than a coyote. And it was right freaking behind us. Austin and I don't even look to each other, we just keep running, finally clearing the trees and entering the meadows near a creek. Garrett appears behind us, rifle slung over his shoulder, and he's shouting to keep running. The scream gets louder, but not like in volume. It's getting closer. Garrett tells us to keep going, we're almost across the line. He full stops and takes another shot before moving again. Oh god, this is how I'll die. JPG. Suddenly, more freaking screams. They are everywhere. We see an old fence not more than 30 yards away. Austin leaps that crap like a gymnast. I'm like a few seconds behind him, land on my back and see stars. Garrett leaps over and takes aim again, completely out of breath. We're on our side, piss off. Screaming literally stops, there's no damn crickets or crap to fill the void, just 3 adult men crying like bitches. Austin on his knees, fairly certain he just vomited. I'm not even here anymore. Garrett, where's the damn lantern? Garrett keeps his gun up, but his knees are shaking. Garrett whispers back in the trees. We all look up and see the tree line. Sure enough, lantern is sitting in trees at the edge of the meadows. There's something standing near the trees. It's way too freaking tall. It doesn't really move, just jitters back and forth, like someone cut out the in-between frames of an animation. It moves back and forth across the trees, the light blocks out the details, which was fine by me. It turns and sort of hovers across the ground. Its knees are freaking backwards, holy crap. Garrett is heaving now, his breath is ragged but he seems to be okay. Garrett, what the hell? Shut up. I'll admit it, I'm full on sobbing now, but I'm so cried out I can't actually make tears, just blubber in the corner. We're on our side, damn it. You know the rules. Another one appears from the woods and starts to jitter. Garrett aims up and shoots again. I feel my ears ring for a second. The figures damn freak out and rush back and forth across the tree lines, falling in and out of the light. For a second, I think I see 3 shapes moving around, but I don't care, I just want this crap to stop. The light in the trees flickers, and Garrett curses. When the light goes out, run as fast as you can and scream and holler for Grandpa. Don't stop even if I tell you to. Austin doesn't even argue. I'm nodding and turning to stare at the trees. The light flickers again but comes back. The shapes stop moving. Damn, they got bigger. No, they're closer. The light flickers, I expect them to get bigger again. But the light doesn't come back on and we freaking book it. Austin takes the lead, rushes into the forest behind us screaming for Grandpa. Garrett doesn't even hold the rifle for a shot anymore, he's just running like we are. We hear the screams again, but they're getting closer. Oh god, they're closer. Suddenly, lights, freaking lights everywhere, the screams stop. Grandpa is like 50 yards away with my dad and like 3 distant uncles and some black dude in a sweatshirt. They all have guns, what the hell? Garrett and Austin freaking slide to the ground in front of Grandpa. I don't give a damn and just crash into my dad, who just sort of hugs me for a second as I keep crying. Garrett is saying a bunch of things but he's saying it so fast I can't understand him with his accent anymore. Grandpa and one of my uncles just nod. Where's your friend? Trent ran past us, didn't he reach you? Grandpa grabs me and Garrett. Austin is curled up weeping on the ground. Take him to the house, hide him in the guest room with no windows. They seen what he looks like. I freaking want to go home, or to whatever the hell counts for home. Grandpa says I need to go with them, says Garrett has a good gun. We walk through the woods again, have to admit, feel a lot safer with all the guns. The black guy whispers something to Grandpa, my dad keeps marching, hand on my shoulder. Garrett starts calling out for Trent, tells me to start calling too. We keep calling out, the black guy says something to Grandpa again. We reach the fence again. Exact same spot, vomit still on ground where Austin was. Grandpa waves flashlight around, illuminates the meadows, uncles are doing the same. Suddenly, shape darts out of the tree line, crying and huffing. It's Trent. He stops a few feet from the fence and falls on his knees, he's crying like me. Grandpa and uncle's totally quiet, Garrett and I don't move. I thought I lost you guys back there at the campsite. I'm scared because nobody is saying anything. Garrett talks first. Where did you go, Trent? I got lost ahead of you, got turned around I guess. Grandpa leans in and whispers something into the black guy's ear, he nods, Dad tightens grip on my shoulder. Trent looks confused. Aren't you guys gonna help? Grandpa moves his gun a bit. Help with what? Help me get over there. The fence is tall and I'm tired. Grandpa and my uncle slowly lift their guns. What do you mean? You look fine. Haha, funny guys, seriously, let me in. Grandpa is deathly serious now, I have never felt so scared of a man. Trent looks nervous, almost antsy now, keeps looking back to the tree line. I felt like something was off obviously, but I'm too freaking scared and stupid to figure out what it is. Help me over the fence. The black guy talks up. Come over here, kid. Trent freaking stops and glares at the black guy. Not you. You can't. It's not your property. Grandpa starts to raise the gun now, my dad tightens his grip. He's a friend of the family. He's not the owner, it's rude. Trent was invited to the reunion. Trent is still on his knees, but he feels like he's just waiting to pounce. You know that feeling of superiority you get when you stand over someone on their knees? I wasn't feeling that, not one bit. At this moment I realized what seemed so weird about Trent. He wasn't freaking breathing. Trent is now staring daggers at Grandpa, uncles are training their guns on Grandpa, the black guy is just holding the flashlight on Trent's face. My dad whispers something into my ear along the lines of Trent will be fine. Grandpa shoots the gun into the air, just like Garrett did, and then waits for the shot to stop ringing out. You aren't invited. This is our side, you know the rules. Grandpa and my uncle slowly start to back away, Garrett and my dad guiding me back. The black guy keeps the flashlight on Trent and moves in time with my grandpa. One of my uncles lags behind, nods to Grandpa and keeps pointing at Trent while we back away. The black guy is slowly moving the... I shouldn't freaking look. I shouldn't freaking look. Freaking look. The light is still trained on Trent. But Trent is moving to the tree line. He's moving to the trees like he's a puppet being dragged back. I wanted to scream, but it's caught in my throat and my father grabs my head and turns it forward. Trent will be fine, Anonymous. The screams start back up, but they're distant. Garrett looks over his shoulder but Grandpa keeps marching. We make it to the house, the party is dying down. I head inside, I'm basically numb now. I hear Austin crying from one of the rooms. Dad takes me inside, lays me down and tucks me in for the first time since I was 10. The 20-year-old in me is indignant. The terrified little shit I am doesn't care. I spend the rest of the night staring at a wall before falling asleep to the sound of gunshots and far-off screaming. I wake up the next day. Grandpa is sitting at table with most of extended family, smoking and reading. Garrett is playing with some of the younger cousins, Austin is watching television. Dad hands me some eggs and a piece of toast. Smiles at me like nothing freaking happened. Garrett sees me, smiles and motions me over. Trent went home this morning, he's okay. Nobody is freaking okay. Who the hell said we were okay? What the freaking freak happened? Garrett gives me a look and quietly states, as matter-of-factly as possible. Last night didn't happen. Trent is okay. Drop it. I found out later Trent had been found by some neighbors down the road. He apparently woke up in the brush and booked it home. He was convinced he was hungover and that explained all the bruises he found on his back and neck. I only asked my grandpa what happened once. He just said that he's had trouble with the people on the nearby land, they keep trying to get onto his property. I asked why they hadn't taken it. He looked right freaking at me and said I haven't invited them in, Anon. That's why. He wouldn't answer anything after that, just said not a problem to everything. It's been 3 years since then. I had various visits to family that ended with similar results, but nothing has ever come close to the fear I felt that night. Part of me wants to look it up and see what the hell those things were. Another part is desperately repressing that urge. I would say it was the closest I ever got to a Skinwalker incident, but I can never figure out what the hell was with the side thing. Anyone feel like sharing? Feels good to talk about this crap with new people.
First time posting a story here. Sorry if I don't exactly follow the conventions. Very normal, low-key childhood, grew up in an area famous for its seclusion and scenery, named after an early 20th century famous painter who retired there. He painted vast landscapes that don't look very different from the current road except for literally a couple new houses. House is surrounded by thick forests, middle of a valley that's sandwiched between several more valleys that grow increasingly large. Always took in the woods/forest familiarity as normal and completely non-threatening, always got cracked up by how people would react to coyote shrieks and owl hoots. Regularly walked by self in the general area around the house since 9 or 10, followed old skid trails and ridges that by all means I should have gotten lost on. Spookiest thing that ever happened to me was getting jump scared by a deer bursting out from behind a tree and scampering off. Was never worried about walking alone. Hiking and just screwing around in the woods was my absolute favorite pastime. It only takes one night for this to completely change and give me severe panic attacks when alone in nature. Early December, I'm 12. 3:30-ish a.m. Mom wakes me up, tells me to follow her onto our porch. Lights are all off, she tells me to be quiet. Dead silence. She's clearly listening for something. We wait for 5 minutes, repeatedly hushes me. I'm getting worried she's having a hallucination or something. Goes back inside, she makes sure the door's locked like 5 times. Tells me she heard crying, she's convinced that it was a kid. I tell her she was probably dreaming. She's convinced it was real, tells me that it woke her up and lasted for the better part of a minute. She describes it in really freaky detail, can explain exactly how it sounded, a choking, terrified sob sort of sound. She immediately jumped to a lost kid. She explains that it was loud enough that she heard it through her closed door and window on the opposite end of the large house. Whatever, I didn't hear anything. Tells me that it came from the direction that my window, right over the head of my bed, points. Weirded out, but not fully convinced. Lock window, go back to sleep. Mid-January, still 12. There are some really beautiful views from ridges overlooking some old clear-cutting areas only a couple hours hiking behind our property. 12-year-old idiot me grabs a granola bar and decides to make a day out of it. On the way, notice some strange footprints. They're completely spherical, as if someone was pressing featureless balls maybe 10 inches in diameter over and over again. Strange little marks at the base of the indentation. Weird, but whatever. They're not exactly threatening, so I ignore them. 3 hours of messing around later, I get back to the house. Mom's home. I ask her about the tracks just out of curiosity. She knows her shit on this stuff. Her dad has a wall full of hunting crap and she was always the kid that he took with her and who kept up with him the best. She's curious too, follows me out to where they start. After a couple minutes, she starts laughing. They're turkey tracks. The turkeys were sitting down because of the cold, and they managed to make perfect circular shapes. The little marks in the center were clearly normal tracks in a few of them. Start heading back, talking and laughing. She goes dead silent. I notice, ask what's going on. She just starts walking away from me, towards the side of a ridge I normally don't go towards. Did you do this? It's a freaking perfect human footprint. Tell her absolutely not, it's bigger than my foot anyway. I walked this exact way early today, this was not freaking here. It snowed last night too, and I was paying attention to every little change in the scenery. The turkey tracks had been very well hidden at the edge of a skid trail. This had to been done after I walked past it. My stomach is in knots. Absolutely zero question about it, it wasn't spooky Bigfoot or anything like that, just a straight up human footprint. You would be dead from frostbite if you were wearing even socks and pajamas outside the night before. Our pipes had almost froze again despite having both a wood stove and furnace working to heat them. It's not a single footprint, there's an entire trail. This just happened to be in clear sight while the others were hidden. The trail is sharply curved in a U-turn, stopping at this footprint and heading back in the same direction. It goes on forever. We walk alongside it for what feels like an hour. It stays close to where I was walking. This is a usual path for me. I'm getting really, genuinely freaked out. Looks like it was following me from a distance. She's getting scared. Anyone who walks barefoot this long is far, far beyond normal, obviously a danger. We both freaking stop dead in our tracks. A few feet ahead, coming up from a ravine and joining with the one we're following, is a new trail. It's a child's footprints. Freaking unquestionable once again, you can see every single toe in perfect detail. We are getting nervous as all hell, but continue on until we see another trail of slightly smaller footprints. There's 2 kids. There's 3 clearly distinguishable spots where snow was pushed/clawed away and someone/something laid down or did something that required contact with the frozen grass. We were probably just getting panicky, but we thought it looked fresh/rushed. We book it back to the house, arguing about if we should call the cops or game and fish/DNR or whoever we would call for something like that. Finally decide that we shouldn't because technically it wasn't our property and my mom's really paranoid about trespassing. Brother got busted for it. All around really bad situation. Decide that we'll go out again tomorrow with dad and brother and see if we can find anything, and then decide if we need to call. That night, still terrified, alternating between freaking snow hobos and oh my god there are frozen corpses in the woods. It snows like crazy, near blizzard, just like the night before. 3:30ish a.m. once again. Woken up by mom standing over me, poking my side. Outside my window, distant but audible, there's the unmistakable sound of a child sniffling and crying. Mom looks terrified. I only hear the last few seconds of it as it wanders into the woods. It's the exact damn direction the tracks were in. After a few minutes of silence, we go out on the porch with dad and brother. Brother and dad both had to wake up around 4:30 a.m. for work, so I was the go-to if anything was wrong at night. This meant my mom was seriously afraid. Silence for a few minutes. We're about to go back inside. We're all eager to get back inside. Snow falling in the dark is somehow horrifying when combined with the sounds of the wind. I still remember how creepy it looked because of the almost full moon. We were constantly looking back to the other end of the porch in paranoia. Suddenly, across the way, in the same direction as the child crying, I hear the most god-awful noise of my entire life. I've never been able to find something even slightly comparable. The best I can explain it as is an inhuman sound being made from a human body. It was a scream, and I'm almost certain that only an adult could make something with that much bass. But it didn't sound like any screaming I've ever heard come out of a human. It was almost closer to an ape shriek, but so much louder, deeper, and almost layered that to compare it to an animal really doesn't make sense. It wasn't one of those cheesy Bigfoot calls, no offense to people who get off to that stuff, but those always just sound like a chimpanzee scream being played in the woods via boombox. This was clearly living and something like a human. This thing goes on for 40 seconds at least, non-stop. It tears through the wind like it's 3 feet away. We're freaking paralyzed. Finally silence, we edge back to our door. It starts again, a little quieter. More of a shriek, only lasts a few seconds. It's on the opposite end of the property. We get inside, put the house on lockdown, get away from the windows. As we were debating if we need to call the cops, the damn power goes out. Our phone, which we just freaking bought, is one of those pieces of crap that can't still be used with just telephone wires still working. Scariest freaking night of my life. Nothing happens, but needless to say we bought a new, non-shit phone in a couple days when the roads were cleared. For the few years I lived with my parents after that, I never really hiked by myself again. I tried to a couple years later and got seriously terrified. Next time our uncle comes to visit, used to live on the road as well, big hiker, we talk about it and ask if he ever saw any footprints or anything like that in the area. Is visibly disturbed, has had similar experiences. Turns out there's been a few situations on the road over the past 30 years that could be the same thing. It sounds kind of crappy without any actual sightings of whatever the hell it was, but anyone who heard the noises I heard that night would never want to go in those woods again either. I had waking nightmares for ages of walking in the snow and seeing something, but I never remembered what it was when I woke up. Lots of freaky crap like that from my mom too. I'm not big into this kind of stuff, but I really don't know what was up that area or how it could be easily explained. I don't think I have time, but I'll try to write up some of my uncle's experiences. They were pretty messed up too.
A little background to start. I work as a topographer/tracker for a local group in Colorado and Wyoming. My job consists of surveying areas and mapping out common game trails in popular places for herds to gather for hunting and ecological purposes. When I'm out, I'm mostly on an ATV until I find a game trail, which then I map out on foot. When I'm going long distances, I stop at outposts that have been set up along the trail to refuel and rest for the night, or go to in case of hazardous weather. I've seen some things that have made me question what's out there, such as mutilated deer, bull elks torn in half, holes dug through the fresh body of animals from the inside out. While seeing things like this is unsettling, I usually shrugged them off as some kind of nasty parasite or bear attack. The thing that made me wonder whether or not I was up against something much bigger didn't happen till recently while near the Wyoming/Colorado border in between outposts in the first week of December. To start, it was snowing fairly lightly, kinda spitting really. The pines stopped most of the snow falling on me while I was walking back to my ATV. While it was snowing lightly, the layer on the ground was at least a foot deep off trail, making it pretty difficult to move or be quiet while lumbering through it. I got on the ATV and drove about a half mile up the trail, almost crossing over into Wyoming, when I noticed another trail that looked freshly made. When I got off the ATV, I noticed some small droplets of blood in the snow going down the trail, with what looked like bear prints with something dragging behind it. I grabbed my gun off the rack on the ATV and slung it over my shoulder. The trail looked fresh, but the prints and blood were starting to get covered in a layer of snowfall. While walking along the trail, I noticed something kind of weird in the middle of the bear tracks. It looked like a human foot almost, but rather elongated and thin, with only 4 toes on the end. The tracks twisted within the bear prints themselves, almost like the animal's foot spun a bit coming out of the bear track. I continued on while occasionally glancing into the track, and sure enough the prints were still there. When I go to the end in a large clearing, I stopped following the bear tracks. Something about being in this large clearing with an unknown animal was making me uneasy. I mapped it out and placed a red line over it, indicating a high predatory area. On the way back, I noticed something strange about my own boot prints. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, standing at 62 with a size 13 boot, but whatever had made the tracks had a footprint significantly larger than my own. But that's not the worst part. Whatever it was, had followed my boot prints back, heading in the same direction I was. Whatever it was, it had snuck behind me and was heading towards my ATV. Shoulder my rifle and put a round in the chamber. I walked back, glancing down every so often to see if the twisted footprints were indeed still in mine. When I got back to my ATV, I noticed that the prints circled my vehicle and stopped behind it and shuffled a bit. I then noticed that my jerrycan was missing, and that thing had left a trail of gasoline down the road from where I came. I hopped on my quad to get going in the opposite direction, hoping to distance myself from whatever stole my fuel. After crossing over into Wyoming, I noticed that everything was rather still. It was still snowing, but the flakes almost seemed to be suspended in the air. Not falling, but not static either. I couldn't hear anything when my ATV was shut off, no animals, no snowfall, not even my own breathing. Almost like something had stopped all sound from existing. I found another game trail, this time a few hundred yards off the trail. I dismounted and walked towards the opening in the trees, with pristine snow covering the rocky terrain around me. All along the trail, I would catch fleeting glimpses of a shadow. Not shadows, no. Just one. Moving along the trail with me. I put it off to lack of sleep making me see things. On my way back, I got a chill up my spine. In my own boot prints were the same tracks I saw at the last trail. The same twisty human-like print, but this time, something was touching the ground in front of them. A swipe here and there, almost like whatever it was tracking me by my scent. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I reached for my sidearm, kicking myself for leaving the rifle on the ATV. I heard a ragged breath from my left. Like if you collapsed a lung on a deer. I drew and fired into the trees, striking an aspen and blowing a hole in its small frame. I saw nothing. No movement, no snowfall, no animal. I started getting the same feeling I was getting from the clearing, and ran back to my quad. Whatever had been following me, beat me there. I followed the tracks around my ATV like last time, and stopped to see what it took next. It took my rifle. My rifle. A large rifle that would require something very large to carry it off in its mouth, or something with hands and the strength to carry it. I looked a little closer at the prints, and found something I had missed every time. Inside the footprints, right where the twist ended, I noticed 4 very long appendages peeking through the twisted snow. It looked like a monkey foot, but longer and more hand-like, but not quiet enough to be human. I mounted and hit the throttle, spinning out a bit until I got traction, and went shooting down the road. I was too low on fuel to go back to a main road where I could get help, and was forced to go to my next outpost. When I arrived, the small cabin/hut-like structure looked so comforting and protective I almost cried. It had fuel for the quad, a safe place for me to sleep, and a radio for help. The sun was setting, and I was firing up the stove after starting the generator when my radio crackled and came to life. I jumped when I heard the static hiss. I ran over to the radio and requested an evac or an extra team for a safe escort. When asked why, I lied and said I was being hunted by a bear and lost my rifle on the trail. The voice on the other end scoffed, "BTU obliged. My team would be there by morning." When I hung up the radio and started to get comfy and safe, I heard a loud thump hit my door. Froze in my bed, not knowing what to do. I finally got up after debating whether or not just hide. I'm no coward, I thought. I grabbed my sidearm and walked towards the door. I peeked out the small window to see if someone or something was out there. All I saw was darkness. Stupidly, I opened the door and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'm going to kill you. You took one of my guns, but I still have the other." No response. I looked at my door to see what hit it, and only saw the remnants of a snowball. A fucking snowball. I waited to see if I could see any movement, when another snowball came flying out of the darkness to my left and hit my shoulder. "You better run, or I'm going to fucking kill you," I yelled, as I slammed the door shut and ran out to confront whatever threw the snowball. I ran towards where the ball came from, watching for prints or signs of movement. I saw something in the darkness that looked like a man had fallen, and was scrambling on the ground to get up, making that raspy breathing noise. I stopped and aimed, but saw that whatever was in front of me had continued to run on all fours at an alarming speed. Faster than I could run. I froze when I saw the black silhouette dart off into the darkness, not sure what to do. After listening and hearing nothing, no breathing, no running, I headed back to my hut. Once I got to the clearing my hut was in, I stopped. Relieved I had made it out of the woods alive. I took a deep breath and calmed myself down, and started walking towards my cabin, illuminated by the lone porch light on the deck. I looked down, trying to follow my tracks back to conserve energy, and nearly vomited. The twisted footprints were in my tracks, heading towards the cabin. I saw the trail heading back towards my cabin, each twisted footprint slamming down into my own until it got to my porch. Amidst all the snow dragged on by the thing, was my rifle and jerry can, placed neatly on the porch, leaning against the wall. The door was jarred open a bit. I could have sworn I saw the leg of the thing dart in as soon as I looked at it. I wish I could say I bursted in there and shot the thing dead, but I was too frozen with fear to do anything but stand there. I wish I could say I was brave and fought the good fight, but I didn't. I crumpled onto the ground, cradling my knees until sun up. I had spent 6 hours in the darkness, waiting for whatever that thing was to come out and finish me. But it never happened. My crew found me covered in snow with my gun drawn and pointed at my cabin. They questioned me and searched the cabin. All of my food was eaten, my bed was torn up and made into a makeshift nest thing like a dog would sleep in, and the radio was destroyed, but no sign of whatever was hunting me.
Be my great uncle. In a Vietnam. Night after battle for Long Tan. Doing the rounds at night. Get turned around. Can't see battle bro. Can't find camp. Suddenly gets pushed and stumbles. Shoulders L1A1. Nobody. Tactically nope, but get pushed repeatedly every other step. Can't see anyone. Tries to yell, no noise comes out, throat closed. Find a tree and lay against it, gun up as long as he can until he dozes. Wakes up at first light to gunfire. His mates engaged a small group of enemy less than 100 meters away. Follow his boot prints in the mud. Shows him as stumbling around like a mongoloid. Landmine under every awkward step. Something had pushed him through 250 meter of enemy mines. Stopped his screams from alerting enemy. Went to Nam an atheist, came back believing in something.
Be 14 years of tender age. In a woods with friends, camping exercise for old country equivalent of Boy Scouts. 4 guys, Rolando, Kenny, Daniel, and me. No adult supervision because fuck if they care. Shooting the shit, cooking possum, good times. When suddenly wild dogs. Machetes come out. Formation is assumed. Bricks are shat. Dogs circle around us, barking and snarling but won't attack. Jabiros no machetes kill. This goes on for a few minutes. Then the quiet happened. Dogs shut the fuck up and scamper. We start hearing labored breathing and what sounds like slurred words. Out of the woods comes the fucking thing. About the size and shape of a dog, but wrong. Front legs look much thicker and back legs just trail behind. Face is all fucked up, most teeth missing, skin looks like it's hanging off teeth. It looks like something is wearing a fucking dog. And the sounds it made. Gurgling, struggling, wheezing. Rolando mutters some Yoruba shit, and as if activated by the sound the fucking thing charges. I'm in the way so it jumps at me. The horror I felt at that exact moment is fucking indescribable. I'm fucking trembling writing this. Clamps down on my closed fist with its few teeth. Freak, scream, tear up like a little bitch. Kenny jumps in and stabs the thing. Fucking nothing. I bring down my machete on its neck and it cuts through with no resistance, like cutting through cream cheese or hardened lard. I just decapitated the fucking thing. In the blink of an eye the body scampers back into the tree line with jerky, spastic motions. We buried the head and stayed awake until dawn cracked, at which point we hoofed it back to the main camp and requested to be excused, which was denied. We were only 1 week into a month-long survival thing, spent the rest of the time sneaking under the main building to sleep at night. I still have the bite mark and am extremely paranoid when camping.
Okay, this is going to be a longish one. Theodore Roosevelt was no pushover for a tall tale, but he was impressed by a story he recounted in his book The Wilderness Hunter, published in 1893. The incident, which had occurred many years before, was related to Roosevelt, as the latter wrote. By a grizzled, weather-beaten old mountain hunter, named Bauman, who was born and had passed all his life on the frontier. He must have believed what he said, for he could hardly suppress a shudder at certain points of the tale. When the event occurred, Bauman was still a young man, and was trapping with a partner among the mountains dividing the forks of the Salmon from the head of Wisdom River. Not having had much luck, he and his partner determined to go up into a particularly wild and lonely pass through which ran a small stream said to contain many beaver. The pass had an evil reputation because the year before a solitary hunter who had wandered into it was there slain, seemingly by a wild beast, the half-eaten remains being afterwards found by some mining prospectors, only the night before. But Bauman and his partner were adventurous and untroubled by the tale. They made camp in a small glade and went upstream to set their traps. At dusk the young men returned. They were surprised to find that during their short absence something, apparently a bear, had visited the camp, and had rummaged about among their things, scattering the contents of their packs, and in sheer wantonness destroyed their lean-to. The footprints of the beast were quite plain, but at first they paid no particular heed to them. Later they examined the tracks more closely and saw that the intruder had walked upright, but the footprints were not those of a human being. At midnight Bauman was awakened by some noise, and sat up in his blankets. As he did so his nostrils were struck by a strong, wild beast odor, and he caught the loom of a great body in the darkness at the mouth of the lean-to. Grasping his rifle, he fired at the vague, threatening shadow, but must have missed, for immediately afterwards he heard the smashing of the underwood as the thing, whatever it was, rushed off into the impenetrable blackness of the forest and the night. The two men slept but little after that and the next day stayed together as they worked. When they got back to camp they saw it had been again destroyed and all their camp kit and bedding tossed about. Two-legged footprints showed plainly in the soft earth along the nearby stream. The trappers spent the night sitting by a blazing fire, one or the other on guard, listening uneasily to the sound of branches crackling and something uttering a harsh, grating, long-drawn moan, a peculiarly sinister sound. In the morning they decided to pick up their traps and leave that afternoon. They worked together as before, until there were only 3 traps yet to be collected. The sun was high, the traps were only a couple of miles from the camp, and the men agreed that Bauman would gather them while the other went back to the lean-to to pack their gear. There were 3 beavers in the traps, and it took Bauman some time to prepare them. With considerable uneasiness he noted how low the sun was as he started for the campsite. At last he came to the edge of the little glade where the camp lay, and shouted as he approached it, but got no answer. The campfire had gone out, though the thin blue smoke was still curling upwards. Near it lay the packs, swapped and arranged. At first Bauman could see nobody, nor did he receive an answer to his call. Stepping forward he again shouted, and as he did so his eye fell on the body of his friend, stretched beside the trunk of a great fallen spruce. Rushing towards it the horrified trapper found that the body was still warm, but the neck was broken, while there were 4 great fang marks on the throat. The footprints of the unknown beast creature, printed deep in the soft soil, told the whole story. The unfortunate man, having finished his packing, had sat down on the spruce log with his face to the fire, and his back to the dense woods, to wait for his companion. It had not eaten the body, but apparently had romped and gambled around it uncouth, ferocious glee, occasionally rolling over and over it, and had then fled back to the soundless depths of the woods. Bauman, utterly unnerved, and believing that the creature with which he had to deal was something either half human or half devil, abandoned everything but his rifle and stuck off at speed down the pass, not halting until he reached the beaver meadows where the hobbled ponies were still grazing. Mounting, he rode onwards through the night, until far beyond the reach of pursuit. Although Roosevelt himself had no similar experience during his years in the West, he did not seem to dismiss the story as far-fetched. "How's that?"
Good to know. Off to the store for some hollow points and candles. I've already got some ash out back from a big bonfire I had a couple nights ago. Also, Osisham. This one is from my senior year of high school, about 10 years ago. Be me. Just starting lurking on /k/. Really want to go in a woods. Recently got my FID. SKS for my birthday. Hell yeah. Invite my only Haskins friend along to go camping near Appalachian Trail. He says yes, brings a Winchester lever action in 30 to 30. Plan is to start up at northern part of Massachusetts, follow the trail south for 3 days. We brought plenty of food and fuel, not much water, as we plan to be near rivers most of the time. Buddy brought a harmonica. From now on, I call him John. We get dropped off near where we want to start and start hiking. Covering pretty decent ground for the first few hours. Slow down a bit after a quick lunch, still moving along pretty well. We stop for the night, set up our tent. I start the fire, boil water we collected. John cooks up some of our food, plays harmonica a bit. We're just sitting around the fire eating and talking. Bring up the fact that we haven't seen anyone all day. He shrugs it off, it's a bit crappy weather and cold, so it's not that strange. Put out the fire and we go to bed, sleeping with, unloaded, Rafus. We get up the next day, strike camp. Eat cold breakfast and start hiking again. Suddenly we hear loud footsteps coming up the trail behind us. Running really fast. We look behind us, figure it's a trail runner or a deer running from something. Ready riffs just in case. The second we turn around, the sound stops. We're a little weirded out, but continue along for a bit. Realize that the woods are quiet as hell ever since we heard the running. Mention it to John. Relax man, it's almost winter. Most things are probably just hiding away in their burrows. Decide I'm just being a pussy. Ignore the silence. We stop for lunch near a stream, and John collects a bit of water from it. Sniffs at it to make sure it's semi-clean. Recoils. What the fuck Anon, smell this water. Wary that he's gonna splash me in the face, I take it and smell it. Oh god this is awful. Gif. Smells like rotten meat and piss. We follow the stream upriver to see if a dead deer or bear fell in and is rotting away in it. After a few minutes of walking, we come to a cave that the stream is flowing out of. John walks in right away. Hey, John. Wait a minute, we shouldn't. Oh, come on, Anon. I've got a flashlight and I'm not gonna fall in, so let's just check it out. Okay, I guess. Grab my own flashlight in my SKS. Following John into the cave. We come to a huge cliff where the water falls down, not really a waterfall, but with E. It's smooth as hell, made of this really shiny black rock. Alright John, looks like we can't go any farther, let's go. Back. Okay, Anon. Just let me look over here, I thought I saw aha. Look at this, man. A staircase cut into the side of the cliff, barely visible unless you look straight at it. John immediately starts climbing up. Follow him, but I'm just about poop maxing my pants. We're about halfway up when suddenly we hear this voice. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help Mare. Just repeating the same thing over and over, in the exact same tone of voice, exact same inflection. It sounded like a broken record. The voice was creepy as fuck, it sounded like a human voice coming through a fucked up speaker. Crackly at the edges and sort of deeper than it should be, obviously feminine. It's coming from the top of the cliff. John shouts up to it. Don't worry, we're coming for you. Just hold on. John, wait a goddamned minute. What the fuck, Anon? Are you just gonna walk away from somebody who might be stranded or hurt? No, but I don't think that dash. Then let's fucking GOL. He double times it up the stairs, rifle slung over his shoulder. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. Voice gradually getting louder and more distorted. He's going a lot faster than I am. That's what saves me. He gets to the top of the stairs. Shines flashlight toward the sound. Ma'am, are you? Suddenly stops talking. I'm just a fight below the top, I can hear him walking. Sounds really jerky, but steady. Like a metronome or something. Steps suddenly stop. At the exact same time, the voice stops yelling for help. Just barely hear John whisper. Of course, whatever you need. Crunching noise, sound of dripping liquid. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. It's a different voice, and it takes me a second to recognize it. It's John's voice. Oh shit brothers MP3. Fucking sprint out of there. It's a miracle I didn't break my neck on those fucking steps. Managed to contact a friend who was going to pick us up in 2 days. Tell him something got John freaking out. He calls the cops/forest department. Tells me I have to meet them near a ranger station, at a small town. Managed to get out of the woods, Meet up with cops. Claim I buried him. Lots of questioning, realize they think I might have murdered him. Finally break down and tell this old grizzled ranger dude what really happened when we're alone. He just nods. There's some strange things what happen up in those mountains. Might be LL head up there soon and take care of it. What the fuck? Is this guy serious? He smiles at me, and nods toward the wall of his office at the ranger station. A bunch of mounted skulls. They look like fucked up deer/moose/goat heads. Curvy hams, long jawbones, hyogis eye sockets. Now, I'm off to go kill that bear of yours. I'll make sure them city boys know that you didn't do nothing. I'm sorry about that friend of yours. Good hunting. Thank ya kindly. I still can't get over it, especially since about 2 weeks after that, the paper printed a story about an individual who wished to remain nameless, that had taken down a rabid grizzly, not too far off the Appalachian Trail.